Hello, welcome to video part 2 of the preparing Terraform for Azure DevOps. For those that did watch the last video, we manually created a bunch of resources in Azure to allow us to configure our Terraform scripts to make use of a production ready solution. It consisted of, let's have a look. So we've got resource group, Key Vault, storage account for the remote state. And we configured that in here. We also created a Key Vault to store all our secrets that will be later consumed by Azure DevOps project, and so they can put all the keys in and run them at runtime when we kick off a DevOps pipeline. We also created a Azure service principal for our Terraform to use to authenticate to the Azure tenant. There it is there. And then obviously we updated our code to make use of the remote state and also our service principal. And then we successfully created our variables ready to input. And yeah, so that's what we did on the first video. If you haven't watched it, I suggest you do go back and see it. We did create it all manually, but it does sort of walk you through how we use service principals and remote state for a production Terraform deployment. So in this video, we're going to, in the last video, it did take almost half an hour to get all that set up. And that's obviously quite a lot of effort to have to go through every time you want to start a new Terraform project. So in this video, we're going to look at automating it all. So let me just quickly switch over to my slide. So what I did do, first video, we did create a diagram where we sketched out all the moving parts. So I've now put that into a Visio just to make it a lot easier to describe what we're going to be building today. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a resource group, and it's going to be based on the project name, which we will provide it as a variable at runtime, so we can change this and we can reuse the code consistently for different projects. We're going to create a storage account. We're going to create a container in that storage account, and we're going to get the keys for that storage account and store it into the Key Vault. So we're going to create a Key Vault. We're going to create access policies, one for the current engineer, so that would be the engineer running the Terraform scaffolding. And one for the service principal that we're going to create in Azure AD. And then we're going to store these secrets in the Key Vault, which is obviously the storage account keys for the storage account, the client ID and client secret for the service principal, and the tenant ID for our Azure AD tenant. So we're going to create an access permission contributor rights for that service principal to the subscription so that Terraform can use that account to provision resources into our sub. We're going to generate a secret, so basically a username and password for that service principal. And then we're going to, and obviously we're going to use Terraform to do all this. So we're going to use Terraform to deploy all the resources in both Azure, the Azure subscription, and into the Azure AD. So we're going to use two different providers here. So Azure RM for the Azure resources through the ARM templates. And then obviously we're going to use the Azure AD provider to provision the service principal. So we'll get a chance to play around with two different Azure providers in this video. And then lastly, what we're going to try and do is scaffold all our files. So we're going to try and get Terraform to take all the information from here and populate and create these files for us so that we got a starter project. So hopefully we can get that to work, and all these files will be pre-populated with all the configuration needed to connect to our Azure deployment, ready for Terraform to start provisioning resources. Right, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is create a new project. So let's create a new window here. Open a folder. Let's call it build, just to keep it simple. Let's open that. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder called scaffolding. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to put all our scaffolding code in here and then output a production folder with all our boilerplate startup scripts. So in here, let's create a file called main.tf. not main.ft. Let's rename that. That's better. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some variables. Now, the idea is that we should only need to change these for each project that we do, and then the rest will just populate throughout the script. So the idea is that we can just repeat and reuse this for each project that we instantiate. So let's create some variables. Actually, no, let's use locals. Locals are similar to variables. If you want to find out a bit more about their use cases, go back and have a look at one of our previous videos where I covered the difference between locals and variables. But for what we're using here, I think locals would be a lot neater. So the first thing we're going to need to provide our script is a script subscription ID. So let's create that. Subscription ID. What else are we going to want? We're going to want a tenant ID. Yeah, and we're going to want a project name. And finally, we're going to need a location, because that's pretty much going to be the type of things we're going to change for each project. So the subscription ID, I've got it in my notepad, so let me just grab that. So the idea is, obviously, depending on where we're deploying, we can change these values. And obviously, a tenant ID I have in my notepad. Let's call this my project as the name of our project. And the location is going to be North Europe. Right, so we got that. Now we need to configure the provider block. So let's head over to our Terraform documentation. Where was it? So it's in Azure RM documentation. Let's have a look. Yeah, so we're going to need to create a Terraform provider block, declare that we're going to be using the Azure RM, and then we need to configure the actual provider. So let's grab this block and we'll modify it to our liking. We don't need this really, but what we do need is a subscription ID, and we can use our local subscription ID. So it'd be this value. I think that's probably enough for us to get started. So let's get a terminal open, switch over to our scaffolding folder and do a Terraform init to get our project started. Let's see if it errors. No, all good. Right, so next let's create our resource group that's going to contain our Key Vault and our storage account. So create resource group. It's always good to annotate your code. So let's go back over to the providers and let's have a look for resource group. Save me typing too much. So we want to create a resource group. So it's this one here. So what's the block? Very simple block. Let's grab that and paste that into our code here. Let's call it RG. And the name is going to be, actually do location first. So we've already got that in our local. So location, and obviously the name, we're going to have to use interpolation here because we want it to have a string of text at the start, at the beginning, which is going to be consistent, but then we also want it to be our project name. So we can do that by, so we want it to be RG dash, and then we can use this syntax to grab the local dot project name, and then we want a dash management for our resource group name. All right, let's just see if that's going to work. So let's do a Terraform plan. All good. It's going to create us a resource group called RG my project management. So let's just apply that. Just make sure it does actually apply. Okay, so that's completed successfully. So let's just quickly head over to the portal and just make sure it does exist. There it is, my project management. Okay, so next up, we're going to need to create a key vault. Yeah, let's do the key vault next. Right, so let's have a look at what the syntax is for the key vault. Right, so we want the Azure RM Key Vault. So let's have a look. Right, this one here. So let's grab that block and modify it to our liking. Right, so again, very similar to what we did with the name of the resource group. Let's do something similar here, but this time let's give it a name of KV and we'll call it TF for Terraform. The location is going to be, we want it stored in this resource group. So let's change the location to just simply be RG. So it's going to reference this alias and get the location and stick it there. And a similar thing for the resource group name. So let's change that. Again, it's just going to put it into this resource group. Disk encryption we don't really need on this one because we're not using it for that. It's just going to be stored secrets. The tenant ID we can get from our locals. .tenant ID. Soft deletion's fine, purge protection's fine, skew standard. Now, I don't really want to create an access policy here because I'm going to create a different block to create our access policies. So let's just tidy that up a little bit. So, oh, we don't want to call it example either. So let's give it a decent alias. We are only creating one key vault with this, so we can get away with just the word KV. Right, so let's see if that will provision. Looks good, so let's apply that. Okay, so that's now finished. We've got our key vault, so let's head over and check it out. Project. Yeah, there's our key vault. So the next thing we need to do is probably create an access policy. Initially for myself, so me as the engineer, so we can view the contents. So let's do that next. So let's head over to our Key Vault access policy. Right, so what are we going to do here? So we're going to create a new resource access policy. So let's grab that. So this one's going to be for the admin. The Key Vault is going to be this Key Vault up here, so it's KV. So let's change that. Right, so the tenant ID, yeah. So this here, we can get a data connection to our current logged on credential. So me, as the engineer running this Terraform, and get the information we need to create the policy. So in order to do that, we do need to create a data connection. So I would imagine back over on their documentation, there probably is doing that. Yeah, there we go. So let's grab that. So let's stick that in there. Yeah, so what this is going to do is going to create a connection to our current config. So who we're connected to with the Azure AZ login. And then it's going to grab the tenant ID from that data block and the object identifier as myself. Key permission, so we don't really need any keys. We're not going to store keys in there. But we do want secrets. We're going to want a bunch of them. So we're going to want get, set, I don't know if it's case sensitive, but just in case. List, and we'll probably stick in delete as well. Okay, so that should create us an access policy, assign it to our Key Vault, and assign it to myself. So let's run that and see what we get. Okay, it's going to add one. Let's apply that. That finished. So let's go and see if it's created our policy. Let's refresh that. There we go. So the policy for me, get list on the secrets. Okay, now let's populate that Key Vault with some secrets. So let's head back over to the code. Right, so what is actually let's go and grab, how do we add a secret? What would it be? Key Vault secret. Yeah, so we've got this one. So let's have a look. So we got the Key Vault. So this is the bit we want. So very simple block of code. So let's grab that. So let's so this is add secrets, because there's going to be quite a few we need to add, and we'll probably need to create them as we go. Key Vault. We haven't created the service principal yet either. So right. So the first secret that we can add is what we already know is the tenant ID. So let's call that tenant ID. And the name will be, let's give it this, we want it to be, what do we want it to be? It's going to be whatever the name is in our script, isn't it? So we want, for when we use Terraform in DevOps, so we're going to call it spn-tenant-id. So that's the name of what it's going to be in the Key Vault. And obviously the value is going to be our local.tenant ID. And the Key Vault we want to put it into is that Key Vault there. I don't think we've got any other information yet to create the other Key Vault secret. So let's just run that one, put that one in. Make sure we've got the process right. Okay, no errors. Let's apply that. Okay, that's completed successfully. Let's go and have a look in our Key Vault. Under secrets, there it is, SPN tenant ID, and then it should have the value of our tenant ID. I'll show you secret. There it is. So that's all good. Okay, so now next up, let's create the storage account. So let's head over to our documentation, storage account. Right, so resource storage account. There we go. So it's quite a straightforward one again. Let's grab that block, put it into our code, annotate it obviously. Create remote state storage account. Right, so let's call it SA. The name is going to be based on our project name. So let's SA, what was it? Thing is, because you all probably know that storage accounts need to be all in lowercase, so we need to do lower, is it brackets? I think it's brackets. Yeah. Local dot project name. And I'm just going to call it TF123. Hopefully that's going to be unique. We want to put it into the resource group that we already have, and also use the location of where that resource group is. Standard, we can just use LRS for this. We're not overly that bothered. Obviously in production you may want to use geo redundant storage, but I mean for Terraform state file you can easily recreate it. I'll say easily, it can be recreated. Don't need tags. So let's see, is that going to work? Let's plan for that. Okay, no errors. Let's apply that. Okay, so that's finished. Let's have a look and see what it's created. So refresh that. We should have our storage account any second now. There it is. Let's give it the name we want, project TF123. So now we just need to create a container in there, a blob container to store our state file. So let's have a look. That's Terraform docs, storage account container. No, what would it be? Storage container. Yeah, there we go. Right, so that's it there. So what's it need? Yeah, okay. Let's grab that block. So we want it to be called container. Right, the name we want it to be TF state. And the storage account it's going to go into is this one, so SA. And container type, I don't think it's, yeah, we'll keep it as private. So again, let's plan for that. Okay, no errors, let's apply that. Okay, so that completed with no errors. So let's go and have a look, make sure our container does exist. There it is. Right, so we've got these access keys. Obviously, these, we want to put them into the Key Vault. So let's do that next. So if we go back up to our secrets, where do we create the secrets? Key Vault, that's why annotation is good. Right, add secret. So let's create another secret. So this one, we're going to call it storage key 1. And the name, I've got it in my notepad from when we did the Key Vault earlier. So we're going to give it the name of storage state key 1. And the value of that is going to be from our storage account. So this storage account, so let's see if we can work this out. So it'll be Azure RM accounts SA, storage account SA, and I think there's one called primary access key. There we go. So that'd be primary access key, and we're going to put it into that Key Vault. So we're also going to create one for the second key, for the rotation key. Let's call that one 2, and we're going to give that the name of 2. And this time it's obviously going to be the secondary access key. So let's see what that does. Plan for that. Okay, all good. So let's apply that. Okay, so that's completed. Let's just go and have a quick look. So if we go back to our Key Vault, we should now have additional secrets, one for the storage state key. Let's have a quick look, make sure it's got a value, which it does. And then obviously we've got one for the second key. Oh, went too far. Second state key. I've just noticed that even though that was successful, that's because we'd already provisioned the Key Vault and the access policy. Now, if we were going to run this on a clean greenfield build, it's probably going to error because it's going to attempt or potentially attempt to create these secrets before we've assigned the Key Vault policy. Yeah, so this here, that needs to run first before we can even try and add, because we've got get, set, list, delete. That permission may not apply. So Terraform may attempt to create these secrets before we have access to the policy. So we're going to just we're just going to add a depends on to each of these secrets. So there's a depends on. So this is basically make sure that it provisions in the correct order. So we want to depend on Azure RM. Which one will it be? It would be that policy. So we just grab that and add it to all our secrets, just to remove the risk of provisioning in the wrong order and erroring. Okay, so I'm just going to run a plan just to make sure that that doesn't error and we haven't introduced any issues. Okay, all good. Let's just quickly refresh ourselves on where we are. So let's go back to our slides. Hold on a sec. There we go. Right, so we've created our resource group. We've created our storage account. We've created our Key Vault. We've populated it with some keys, secrets. We've still got to do this service principal. We've created an access policy for the engineer, the admin. We still got to add one for the service principal. So let's crack on and create this app registration service principal then. So let's switch back to our desktop. Right, so in order to do this, we've been using the provider Azure RM, Let's have a look. So we've been using this provider. So that's access to the Azure Resource Manager. We now need to use the Azure AD provider. So we need to add an additional one in here. So let's have a look and see if we can find it. Be under providers. There we go, Azure Active Directory. So where's the documentation? Yeah, so we've got this Azure AD provider. So let's add that one in. So I'll assume we can just put it in there. So it's going to install this provider, and then obviously we need to call that provider. So let's grab that. And we'll put it down here with these other providers. Right, obviously we know what the tenant ID is. It's going to be local.tenantid. I think that's all we need. Let's have a look. So we're probably going to have to do a Terraform init again, just to download and install that additional provider. There we go. So up next, we've got our provider installed and ready. So now we just need to create our service principal. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is create an app registration. So what will that be? Application? Nope. What would it be called? There we go. Azure AD application. So let's have a look and see how we do this. All right, so there's quite a lot in here. We don't necessarily need a lot of this. So what is required? So we need probably just a display name. I think all the rest is optional. So let's just grab that piece. Right, so let's go down to our code and let's now prepare our create service principal. Right, so we're going to create a new service principal and we'll just call this one app registration. Display name, we're going to use similar approach. So let's grab, no, not that one. Let's grab this one. So we want it to represent our project name. So let's change that to SP for service principal and project name, and we'll call it DevOps because we're going to use it in our DevOps project. I think that's all we need to do to create the app registration. Let's just plan that and make sure it works. Yeah, no errors. It's going to create service principal, so let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, that was quick. So let's go and have a look in our Azure AD and we should have our service principal. That's all right, our app registration. It's not a service principal yet. We called it my project. There we go. There it is. So now we need to create a service principal based on this app registration. So let's go and have a look at our documentation. What's this going to be called? Service principal. There we go. Service Azure AD service principal. So this is what we need. Obviously, it's based on an app registration that we've already created. So let's grab that. Let's tidy that up a little bit. So let's look at this. So we're going to call this SP. I don't know why it's got these errors. We'll have a look at that in a second. So client ID is going to be this application up here. So app registration. Client ID. And role assignment, don't need. And we don't really need owners either. I don't know why it's showing up red. So I'm just going to pause it for a second. Okay, I've found the problem. The issue is their documentation. So in the Azure AD documentation, because we used the example, where is it? We took that. This version does not support client ID. It's expecting to have application ID. So all I've done to make it work is update the version, done a Terraform init update, and it's pulled down the latest version, and now my syntax is error free. So I wish they would update their examples when they update their versions, but never mind. So let's do a Terraform plan on this one. Make sure. Oh, okay. Also need to make sure we're in the correct folder. Let's do that again. Okay, it looks good. Let's apply that. Okay, looks good. So now we need to create a client secret to go with our principal so that we can store it in the Key Vault. So let's go and have a look on how we do that. So let's have a look. Application password. So let's grab that. So let's call it client ID, client secret. Right, so the application ID is going to be this one. So let's grab that. App registration, pure AD application registration. That won't be that, would it? It's just that. So there, again, the examples are wrong. We don't need to worry about rotating password on that, but we do want to give it a display name just to, so we know. So we're going to just give it DevOps. So when we look at it, we can see what it's allocated to. Right, let's run that. Let's see what it produces. Okay, let's apply that. Okay, let's go and have a look and see whether it's created our secret on our service principal. So let's go and have a look at our app registration. My projects, client secrets, and there it is, our DevOps with the value of whatever that is. So now let's store the client secret and the client ID into our Key Vault. So let's go back to our code. So where's our bit about the secrets? Add secrets. Here we go. So let's copy one of these. So we're going to have a new Vault secret. The first one's going to be SP underscore client underscore ID. And the name we're going to use, I'm just going to grab it from my notepad so I don't mess it up, because it's critically important that we keep these what we want for the DevOps pipeline. So the value of this is going to be the service principal. So let's see if we can work that out. So Azure be this one, and that will have a client ID. And we want it in that Key Vault. Obviously, we want to make sure that the policy is provisioned before it tries to create a secret. So let's copy this, and we'll do the same for client secret. And we want that to have a value of client secret. And this time, we're going to grab it from Azure, can't spell, Azure AD, password client secret .id. And we're going to in that Key Vault again. We want to make sure that we have our dependency there. And lastly, I think that's actually all we need, isn't it? Yeah, so it's the client secret and client ID. So let's add that and see what happens. Okay, no errors. Let's apply that. Okay, everything's green. Let's go and check it out. So let's go back in here. So we should have on our Key Vault now, we should have some additional secrets. There we go. We've got our client ID, our client secret, tenant ID. So I think we've got everything we need in there now. So the Key Vault is pretty much done. The only thing we do actually need to do is, obviously, we need to create an access policy for that service principal we've created. So let's do that now. So let's go to our Key Vault where we've created the access policy for the admin, and we'll copy that out, and we'll create one for our service principal. So let's give it a decent name. SP access policy sounds good enough. So the Vault ID is going to be in the same Key Vault. Now, obviously, what we need here is we do need to change some stuff. So the tenant ID will be the local.tenant ID, because that could change as projects go. And the object ID in this case is going to be our service principal. So that is Azure AD service principal SP. Is there an object ID? There is. And obviously we want it to have the same permission, so get list, etc. So I think that's good. Let's make sure that works. Okay, let's apply that. Okay, all green, so no errors. Let's go and have a look and see whether it's created our access policy. There we go. So our service principal now has access to the secrets in our Key Vault. Okay, let's flip back over to our slide and see what we've got left to do. Right, so we've pretty much created everything now. We've got our app registration, Key Vault, storage account, resource group. What we need to do now is we need to assign contributor permission to the subscription for the service principal. And I'm probably also going to create a role within the storage account for that service principal. The reason I'm doing that, I know technically, if we're going to give it contributor rights to this subscription, it will have access to that storage account. But in some scenarios, you might put your state file in a different subscription. So we're just going to future-proof that, and we'll create a specific role for that as well. So let's switch back to our desktop. Okay, so let's have a look. Where's best place to fit these in our script? Well, we probably should just create a new role. So let's assign SP perms. Right, in order to do that, we're going to look for an Azure RM role assignment, I think it's called. Let's go and have a look. So let's go back to our Azure RM, which is this one. So it's role, role definition, role assignment. Let's have a look. So we're going to create a new role definition. Okay, so let's grab that. Right, so let's call this one SP role. And the scope for this is going to be, let's think about this. So it's going to be text. So we want to scope it to the subscription. Spell that correctly. And we want it to be what we defined in our locals. So local.subscription ID, local.subscription ID. And the definition, the role we want to give it is contributor. And the principal we're going to add to it will be our service principal. So Azure AD service principal object ID. So yeah, that should create it. So, but we're also going to create another one for the storage account. So let's call that storage. The scope of this is going to be our, let's think. So it would be our Azure RM storage account SA object ID. No, not object ID. It doesn't like that. Yes, it does. So for this one, we'll give it owner. And then obviously the principal ID is the same principal. So the service principal, I think it's, is it going to be object ID or ID? I'm not sure. Let's go back and have a look at the docs. Yeah, it is object ID. But then this one is using ID. Okay, let's see what this does. Doesn't like that though, does it? SA object ID, storage account SA object ID. No, it's not an object ID. It's going to be ID, I think. Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, it didn't like that. So why not? Subscription ID, so resource role assignment, expected segments, resource ID, but got 2 subscription ID. See what I've done wrong. There's a typo there. It should be subscriptions, then our ID. So let's try again. Okay, that worked. So let's apply that. Okay, that completed with no errors again. So let's go and have a look. And this time, let's have a look at our subscription. And let's have a look and see whether it's given it access. There it is. My project DevOps contributor rights to the subscription. And also let's quickly just check the storage account. Access control. And this one should have owner rights. There it is, owner. All right, let's switch back to our slides and see what we've got left to do. Right, so we've pretty much done everything now. We've got resource group, storage account, key vault, secrets, policy setup, app registration, permissions assigned, all done through Terraform. So the final bit is this glorious piece here. Wouldn't it be nice that when we do all this, it also creates us the main TF files that we need to run the project? So I'm going to attempt to use Terraform to create some local files, these ones in particular. Obviously, you can mix and match them to whatever your framework is you work towards. And we're going to try and populate them as well. So the provider block, for example, with all the information we need to connect based on all this information. So yeah, let's have a go at doing that. Let's go back to our desktop. Right, so first thing is, let's have a look and see. There should be a local provider. There we go. It should be quite a small one, and it allows us to create local files. So let's have a look and see how we do that. Looks very simple. So let's just grab that and add it to our code. So this is where we're going to create outputs, output files, tiles, files. Right, so let's stick this in first of all. So we're going to create a local file. Let's start off with a simple one. Let's do the main.tf because it's going to be empty. So we don't need any content in that file. Now the path, obviously let's give it main.tf. So at the moment, it's just going to put it into the root folder scaffolding. And we don't want it in there. We want to create a folder above that or below that, depending on what the alphabet dictates. But we want it to be in the root. So let's do a back a couple and then create a folder called production. And we'll create it in there. Because we're using a new provider, we are going to need to run Terraform in it just to get that down. So let's have a look and see if we've got it in our... So let's run that. Just make sure we download this new provider we're going to use. There we go. So it's installed it. We don't want it to have a content of F. We just want it to be empty. So let's have a look and see what that produces. So let's do a plan. Looks good. Let's have a quick look what it's going to do. So yeah, it's going to create a new file called production. Sorry, main.tf in a folder called production. So let's do that. Terraform apply. There we go. Got our folder production and we've got a main TF, an empty one. So let's do one for all those other files. So let's do one for provider and let's call that provider.tf. And let's do one for variables. And let's call that variables.tf. And let's finally do the TF vars that will help us with our development. Let's call that TF vars. And let's call that one Terraform.tf vars. Okay, let's run that, see what we get. All good. Let's create those. Excellent. So in our production folder now, we've got all our files that we wanted. Obviously, they're all empty at the moment. We kind of could do with them being populated. So let's do that next. So let's start with the variables. So if we go back to our one from the other day, yeah, there we go. So this is what we want in our variables block. So let's go back to our document again. So variables. Now, because we want it to be multi-lined, we can use the EOT function. So let's do that. And then we can put what text we want in there. So technically that should update our variables file to contain this content. So let's check that out. Okay, let's apply that. Okay, so that's finished. And there's our variables with all our content. So we need to do the same for the provider and the TF-vars file. Obviously, let's go back to the provider block from our previous video. So this is basically the content we want, but we're going to modify it to be specific to our project. So let's go in here, use the same principle. So under the provider, let's do an EOT. And in here, we're going to want it to publish this. So we're happy with this. Obviously, this needs to change. We want that to be we want that to be the subscription ID, what we choose in our local. So let's do that. Local.subscription ID. And obviously the project name is also going to be from our, in fact, we can grab that from, it's the resource group name anyway, it's not the project name, is it? So we can grab that from our code. So that's Azure RM underscore resource. Unfortunately, the IntelliSense doesn't always work when we're using this EOT function. So I'm going to have to get my type and spelling correct. Otherwise, it's going to not go down well. .rg .name. And obviously, the similar thing for the storage account. So we want that to be Azure RM underscore storage underscore account SA dot name. The container name, obviously we've got that we can draw from our code as well. So Azure RM underscore storage container, I think. Is that what it's called? Storage container. Yeah, container dot name. And obviously the key, let's give it the project name .tf state. Because we might want to use the same storage account for different projects. So let's use locals dot project name for that. Project underscore name, I think. .tf state. So what do we need to change here? So obviously we just need to change this one here. So we're going to change that to be local. Let's try again. Local. I'll get there in a second. Local dot subscription ID. So if we've got this right, it should populate exactly what we need in our Terraform provider blocks with all the parameters we need specifically for the setup that we've got going. So let's have a look. Okay, so it didn't like something here. The key locals project name has not been declared in the root module. So it's because it should be local dot project name. I told you the typing with the lack of IntelliSense will mess me up. Okay, looks good. Let's apply that. Okay, so it's created our new provider file and it's fully populated and looks correct. I'll probably want to change that to, I guess it doesn't really matter, to lowercase. Then it's going to accept the variables and so that's pretty much bootstrapped our initial build, almost like a kickstart file. So the only thing we need to do now is the TF-vars file. So let's quickly do that one. So the TF-vars will be, let's get it from our previous one. So TF-vars will be this, but we don't need these values. So let's just grab that and we can dynamically populate those values. So let's go back to our TF-vars. Again, let's use the EOT. And let's stick that in there. So what do we need? So we want the client ID, which will be grabbed from Azure AD underscore service principal SP dot client ID. The client secret will be derived from Azure AD underscore, what was the name of that one? Application password, I think. Yeah, client secret value, obviously. And then obviously the tenant ID, we can also get that from the, you can get that from the local.tenant ID. All right, and then we're going to output that file. So that should also create that. So let's just run that and see what we get. Apply it. Okay, so that looks good. So let's go and have a look. So our main is empty as expected. Our provider block has everything we need. Our Terraform.tf vars file is populated with all our key information to be able to run it in our dev environment, and then obviously our variables for the input for the provider block. So yeah, that's pretty sweet. So, but does it work? So let's find out. Let's go over to the new production folder we've created. Let's do a Terraform init and look for errors. So what this should be doing now is initializing our project. It's migrated to the back end, so it's all looking good so far. It's downloading the providers that we declared, and it looks good. So let's quickly jump over to our storage account. So in here we should now have our TF state, and there's our project state file remotely done, and it's all authenticated using our managed identity. That's our service principal. So let's just check it can actually create things. So let's go into our main.tf and just create a resource group. Always me when I'll do that. There we go, that's better. Azure RM underscore resource group, and we'll just give it a name of test, 2 T's, and location, let's give it North Europe. Nope. Right, let's see if it creates it. So let's do a Terraform plan. Okay, Terraform apply. That one. All good. So let's head over to your portal and see if it's created that test of 2 T's resource group. Obviously, it takes a while to update in the portal, as we've seen in the last couple of videos. So let's try again. There it is. Right, so essentially our script looks like it's working. It's, I guess now what we need to do is test it. So let's do that next. So to test it, we need to do a full end-to-end. So let's grab our scaffolding code. Let's just put it in our clipboard for a minute. Obviously, how you manage this going forward is up to you, but you know, you could have it in a code repository, you can check it out. But I'll show you in the next video when we actually set up the Azure DevOps how I intend to use it. So let's create a new project. Let's go with open a folder. Let's create a new folder, and we're going to call this final test. And let's create a folder in there called scaffolding. And in there, we're going to create a main.tf, and we're going to put our new code in there. Right, so first thing we're going to do, obviously the description's the same, tenant's the same, but the project name's going to be different. So let's call it, I don't know, Batman, for no choice of a better word. So our project called Batman, it's going to do everything we want. So let's now open up a terminal, change to our scaffolding folder. And I'm hoping if we do a Terraform in it, we get no errors. Fingers crossed. There we go. So now we can do a Terraform plan. Okay, let's have a quick look and see what it's going to do. So it's going to go through, start from the top. So it's going to create an app registration. It's going to create, so I won't go through it all, actually there's a lot there, but it's all green, there's no errors. So let's just crack on and apply and see what we get. So let's apply that. Now this will take a while because obviously it's got to create quite a lot of resources in Azure. So I'll pause you up and I'll bring you back if it errors, or hopefully when it's all completed. Hooray! It completed with no errors first time. So it's created all our resources. So let's check it out. Well, the first thing is, let's have a look at our scaffolding output. So it's created us a main, empty as expected. And it's provided our provider block. So I'm hoping it's created the resource group and the storage account to those specifications. It looks like it's created a service principal because it's got all the details in there and the client secret and our variables. So let's go and have a look and see what it's done. So we should have a resource group called Batman. And where is it? Oh, there it is. RG Batman Management. And in there we should have a Key Vault and a storage account. So our storage account should have a container, which it does. Our Key Vault should have some Key Vault secrets. And there we go, got all our secrets in there. We've got an access policy, should be for our service principal that we created all through that script. So it's all looking good. I think there's much more to look at. We've kind of confirmed it's all working. So if we now go and have a look at the app registration, we should see our Batman that we've created. Yeah, so it looks like it's all worked. I suppose the other thing we just need to check is to make sure it's got assigned the permission to the subscription. There we go. Batman's got contributor rights. So yeah, everything looks perfect. So we're ready to go. So the idea is we can just take this scaffolding, start our projects with it. It provisions everything we need in Azure to do it DevOps ready and creates our files to start doing the development of our project. So yeah, so sorry guys, that was a video a bit longer than I was expecting. It's over an hour, but obviously we went through quite a lot. So we're now ready for the next video, which is going to be when we set up the Azure DevOps project, configure all the continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines, and we'll do all the sort of validation. We'll set up a Git repository, and we'll set up branch policies to check in and out of code. So yeah, it should be quite a good one. Yeah, so hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, make sure you do stick around for the next one. And if you did like the video, hit that like button, please. And if you haven't already, please subscribe because it really helps me if you do. So until then, take care.